In this episode of Coglog, I'm going to talk about why I think the term evolutionary robotics is a double misnomer. I want to be clear that I in no way disapprove of the type of research that's being done in robotics, nor am I here to debate evolution. My only point is that the terms evolutionary and robotics are the wrong words for this area of research. The word evolution in this sense describes a naturalistic, indifferent meandering through a series of suboptimal ad hoc solutions. And the word robotics contains within it negative connotations for mechanical cognition. So how the hell do robots evolve? Evolutionary robotics is a study of an artificial analog of Darwinian natural selection to design simulated agents. This has the advantage of analyzing biologically plausible minimal models of cognition with controllable prejudices. These in silico cognitive systems address bypassed real-world problems, such as homeostasis under visual inversion, the origins of learning, and the ontogenetic acquisition of entrainment. This is important and existentially fascinating research. The ER approach allows scientists to create simulated brains and construct insect-like robots with behavior-based incremental subsumption architecture modeled on natural evolution. However, it is not, nor should it be, evolutionary. Naturalists are perpetually perplexed by the diversity, malleability, and complexity of life forms. We search for commonalities among organisms in a quest for natural laws. We are constantly confounded by new discoveries, such as the living coelacanth or Komodo dragon venom. The variety of adaptations is astounding, yet everywhere there are limits. There are no known species with immortality, invincibility, or inexhaustibility. Scientists can infer from this that there must be some natural laws governing biology, just not exactly sure what they are. Well, not exactly a law. Evolution follows from the proposition that nothing appears from nothing. The idea describes an ontologically necessary process, but remains inconclusive about the details. How did the self-organizing principle overcome the thermodynamic non-equilibrium in the prebiotic soup? Why would parsimonious solar-powered biomachines with non-spatial properties retrogress into a complex series of calorically inefficient descendants? How did hominids first learn to think symbolically, and what are the unambiguous advantages of doing so? One of the noblest attempts to categorically incorporate the questionable contiguity of adaptive Darwinian structures was functionalism. This ideology endeavored to demonstrate that the phylogenetic development of biological systems is directly describable through behavioral application. There we have an apparently adequate classification for the range of observable adaptations, while simultaneously implicitly providing a plausible Darwinian narrative for its origination. Unfortunately, the problem remains of mechanically reproducible schematics, causing the explanatory force of functionalism to vanish, like Pluto's planethood into a liminal linguistic lacuna. How does one describe symbolically the function of a hand as opposed to a fist? What would be the biological or mechanical instantiation of that distinction? Roboticists have had amazing success in creating a machine that can pour a glass of wine or a machine that can change a light bulb, but not a machine that can do both. And the problems only increase when it comes to cognition. Who hasn't wondered what is the function of cognition, and yet there is no mechanically reproducible answer? It's rather like asking in what state is a Necker cube. So cognition is poorly understood, and that says nothing about consciousness. Scientists discuss cognition as it applies to thermostats, arthropods, primates, and humans, forgetting to pinpoint where exactly consciousness fits in, if at all. This leads to the so-called free miracles. The idea is that all science needs in order to explain everything is one free miracle, i.e. the Big Bang, and physics takes it from there. For any radical reductionism to work, I insist there needs to be yet another miracle, that of consciousness. Never mind that quantum mechanics contradicts the de facto ex nihilo conjecture, raising fundamental doubts about predetermination in dynamical, undifferentiated components. The problem for the relevance of evolutionary robotics is not so much of physical interaction, but of biologically plausible consciousness. Evolution is a messy consilience of contradictory hypotheses with scarcely any falsifiability. As Karl Popper noted, Adaptation or fitness is defined by modern evolutionists as survival value and can be measured by actual success in survival. There is hardly any possibility of testing a theory as feeble as this. At any given moment, all life forms are a delicate kludge of genetic drift, environmental fitness, exaptation, sexual selection, and biological spandrels, forever on the verge of global extinction. That's not to say it isn't true, it's only a poor foundation for a research program, especially in a broad field that hopes to one day understand the phenomenology of consciousness. Consider the insect-like machines that represent the current high water mark of the discipline. This purports to follow the phylogeny of the aforementioned arthropods in their approaches to physical problem solving, but accepts a top-down schema, ignoring that multicellular life forms merely represent the greasy sheen on the deep well of biomass. Complex life is a geological twinkle perched on the edge of Occam's razor, providing no explicit predictive value and no empirical reductive probability beyond an anthropic buoyancy, thus making an evolutionary model an a priori absurdity. In fact, the best thing about evolutionary robotics is that it is not evolutionary, but simple trial and error, or for PR purposes, just trial. In the natural world, the problems of organisms are constantly unsolving themselves. Environments change, predators change, food availability changes, everything changes. Human society is an attempt to limit natural change. Designing robots to function in the technological world based on the natural world would be backwards and limiting. And thankfully, it's not what the scientists are actually doing. There's no reason to subsume into one's framework the pre-existing uncertainties of a previous flawed paradigm. I'm not saying that is what evolutionary robotic scientists have done, just that the term for what they're doing is inappropriate. I'm not going to say much about the problems of evolutionary approaches to human consciousness, as this would exponentially outgrow this video. I believe the underdeterminacy of the instantiation of cognition through Boolean algorithms or backpropagation is a failure to realize that the fallaciousness of a syllogism is a function of the evaluator's tendency to disagree. As Bertrand Russell pointed out, logic cannot be proven by logic. Computers can't take anything for granted. Until there is a Darwinian explanation for the Kantian mental substrate, I have no hope in the foreseeable future of anything like a viable evolutionary AI, which brings forward the other terminological problem, namely the idea of robots. Surely words have an etymological imperative to outgrow their origins. However, the word robot comes from the Czech word robota, which means compulsory labor. This begs the question of just what exactly we want robots for. There are the obvious industrial practices, but as definitions of cognition go unresolved, we have to ask ourselves, are we creating a conscious race of post-biotic slaves? We have to take real responsibility for the possibility of emergent egos.
Well, I was born yesterday.
This may seem premature, but without a serious consideration of the ethical implications that can inform our research priorities, evolutionary robotics will remain unguided and therefore attenuated in befitting applications. C.S. Lewis wrote in his prophetical masterpiece, The Abolition of Man, about engineering consciousness. They are the motivators, the creators of motives, but how are they going to be motivated themselves? Humanity hides from its own nasty, brutish, and short natural condition. Shall these engineers endeavor to recreate cognition by mimicking the very nature that we fear? I have no problem with the evolutionary robotics researchers' trifecta of heredity, variation, and selection. I would only remind them that evolution involves a variety of other modalities to account for life's variety. I would just change the name. Spinoza said, "Except for mankind, we know of no individual thing in nature in whose mind we can rejoice." I believe John Locke's challenge still remains, that he will show how mind exists without matter when you show how mind arises from matter. The reality of creating fully conscious artificial beings is staring us in the face. We should give up the patronizing connotation of the R word. We must own up to the fact that evolution is blind, in that it has no holistic goals. It is merciless, red in tooth and claw, and unforgiving of the unfit. And it is drunk in that, stumbling through a survivalist space, it takes no heed of the constant precipitous danger of future conditions. I don't know how vehemently researchers involved in evolutionary robotics would defend their namesake. The dissonance emanates from the unjustified expectation that the minimal prior assumptions of Darwinian dynamical systems will reduce the prejudices built into the model and elevate said model's potential to inform unlooked-for aspects of cognition. The informative unpredictability of the model belies the unpredictability of evolution, leaving one to wonder what sort of scientific theory prides itself on its inability to predict, and why you would base your research program on it. Hopper, Darwinism does not really predict the evolution of variety. It therefore cannot really explain it. Evolutionary researchers themselves had said that it would be foolish to claim that ER gives us direct insight into the physical mechanisms of biological organisms. So why is it any less foolish to think that biological organisms would give direct insight into artificial intelligence? I completely support the field of evolutionary robotics. I only want to insert care for how the misappropriation of unqualified terms can hamper scientific progress. It's a bit like an architect designing a building based on another building that hasn't been built. Understanding cognition through evolution is like trying to understand needles by studying haystacks. And if we succeed in creating not just artificial intelligence, but artificial consciousness, there remains the Frankensteinian fear of failing our erstwhile offspring. It's alive! It's alive! If ER did lead to the kind of consciousness the name implies, it will be a servile, suicidal ego, blind, merciless, and drunk.
I think you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed.
You want some more?